morning, good afternoon, good day, everybody, and welcome to this update webinar on the Sustainability Progress Framework. I can see out of the number that had registered for it, we almost have close to half. I don't know whether we give people another 3 minutes before we get into the topic. If you can hear me, you can raise your hand up. I see all hands up. That's quite good. So I think we have the system also in check. So maybe in the next 2 minutes, then we should start. At least for today, the update is not too huge, which means we will also get time for people to ask their questions and talk and have a chance to say something. Thank you very much for the raise of hands. So in 2 minutes, let's see whether we can get a bigger quorum, and then we get straight into the topic. Okay, so without further ado, I think let's get into the topic. We are recording this discussion, so and we will all have a chance to listen to the recording later. So even for those that maybe have not joined or join in between the discussions, then they will also have a chance to listen to the discussion. Again, thank you very much for taking your time this afternoon or this morning. And I'm told now the quality is better. So let's see whether we continue in the same way. So a quick introduction. My name's George Watene from the Global Coffee Platform. I'm helping and facilitating, the development of the Progress Framework. And with quite a number of people, stakeholders, volunteer, and many of you in this call who are contributing to ensuring that then the way we measure progress in the coffee sector then becomes standardized and also efficient in how we do it. In terms of what we have this afternoon, I would like just to give an update of the process, because I realized in the different meetings we have people that have not been part of the process. So it's always good to tell them why we are where we are. And then we are going to touch on something that we planned the last meeting we had, which was a survey. So I'm going to share the results so far. I hope those in this call have also given their inputs, such that we will not be discussing other people's inputs and we do not have a chance to give our say. And then the next part will just be the next steps. So quick history. I know many of you have seen this slide many a times, but I always like putting where we've come from in context and why we are where we are. So for those of you that know, all the way from the Global Coffee Forum that was held in October 2015, just after the SDGs were agreed upon in New York. And then the discussions that we had on Vision 2020 in different countries, and then seeing what coffee stakeholders in those countries are contributing to the SDGs. Then we also had the study together with partners SCAA then and the Sustainable Coffee Challenge, where we had the catalog to try and determine how much money is being spent in greening coffee. which is about 2% of the coffee volume. And of course, asking ourselves, how do we show then what that kind of an amount is contributing to? Then GCP members then in October 2016 meeting and agreeing in the terms of participation to reporting to a framework once that is developed. And of course, that is what we are developing now. And also the dialogue that was there under the Sustainable Coffee Challenge in the whole of 2016 in developing a sustainability framework, and also then the idea that then we should join as one and develop one framework for coffee together, which of course then led to an MOU with SCC back in February. Then of course there was work happening in the countries, and the Brazilians were among the first with the Brazilian working group that came up with about 34 indicators. Then there was the learning or all the other frameworks that were out there, which we looked at so that then we were not reinventing the wheel, but then picking the best and ensuring that then the coffee sector can use that. Then there was the joint working group of stakeholders from the Global Coffee Platform and also as Sustainable Coffee Challenge partners, which then at the end of June came up with a framework which more gave in details, the different pathways, how you achieve the different goals, and what are some of the common ways we can achieve these. And that is documented. So we've come quite a long way. And the latest one is that as a follow-up to the Brazilians, Vietnam has also moved forward to come up with a list of common indicators. But of course, for them, since they've started it when we are in this discussion, we've had a bit of collaboration on that. And they are hoping to have something coming down within this month, that is September. So there's a lot of dialogue happening on this. And then we ask ourselves, why do we need this? So like we say, we need to see where we are as a sector in a common way. So we are saying we're spending 2% of the value of green coffee on sustainability, but what is it achieving? How can we show as a sector what it's achieving? And the other part is, as an individual, how do you tell whether you are in the right direction? Or as a coffee stakeholder, how do you tell you're in the right direction, but also in a common way? And then, of course, the other part is when we know where we are, we ask ourselves, how did we get here? Why are we here? If it's in a bad place, why are we so bad? Or if it's in a good place, why are we so good? And how can we change to the latter? So the topic of today, like I said, is the discussions that we've had from the discussion that we had in the last meeting. And there was a survey, and I want to present the results. And I remember I said at the beginning of, in the message that was sent to those of us in this call, the fact that this call will be to discuss, what people have said, and those that have taken part in the survey are saying is most important to measure first. It's not to say all these other things are not important. And one of the comments actually from some of the people that filled the survey was, all these things are important, but we realize we need to start somewhere. So where can we start and say something concrete about the sector as we build our systems, not only to spend in improving things, but also to tell clearly what has improved and where we are on those issues. So like you can see on the issue of improved livelihoods, although one of the comments was that this is the area with the weakest indicators. So I'm just paraphrasing what someone said. But these are the indicators that we had. One of them was, talking about what percentage of farmers are above the national poverty line. And I think that one, and especially in terms of livelihoods, that one has gotten the highest prioritization from those that took part in the survey. And then the second one, like you can see, I will just put it as it is. The second one, of course, is the issue of child labor, which has also gotten quite a chunk. And the other one is on the issue of minimum or living wage, but in relation to what percentage of work, percentage increase of workers earning either above the minimum or the living wage, and so on. The issue of hunger also came a close fourth. And what we had put as an indicator is, of course, the number of days without sufficient food as the indicator. So the others that maybe were not as popular, but again, the more people we have trying to put in their information on these, the better picture we have. But then we also realize we can't force everyone to take part. We can nudge you many times, and sorry for those that have received more than one messages to do this, but then we can also not then force you. But we'll be very glad if you put your voice on it. And I want to give, I think Catherine has raised her hand. I want to give you a chance to just mention what you want to say. Catherine, let me check whether you're unmuted. Catherine, can you say? Now you're unmuted, Catherine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just, and apologies if this is repetition, in terms of the comment on the unspecificity of livelihoods. I'm just a bit concerned that we don't have more an indicator that is more specific to the actual coffee sector. Like, for example, around poverty and hunger. To me, I would assume, certainly in a country like Tanzania, most coffee farmers are not falling into that poverty line, but yet most coffee smallholder farmers don't have what people would consider a livelihood that gives them an income more than the cost of production. So I wonder how we're relating incomes to the cost of production rather than to the basic poverty line. Because if you're looking at populations who are at the basic poverty line, most of those smallholder farmers could not afford to grow coffee.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And especially on that comment on getting more specific towards coffee, which is quite important. And in relation to the one that you talked about, especially on poverty, is of those coffee farmers, how many are above? But I think we'll take that into respect. And I would kindly ask you maybe also to type it in the chat so that then we have it in record, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And then but thank you very much for that part, especially in us then thinking about indicators that are close to the challenges that are happening in the coffee industry. And anyone else who has any questions, even as I talk, please just raise your hand up and I'll unmute you and we can move on. So that's the part, and thank you again, Catherine, for the discussion. But that's the part on improved livelihood. And that is what so far people have tried to bring together. And the next one is in relation to prosperity, or the economic viability of farming, as some of us are calling it, and so on. Just 1 second. That's done. And thank you everyone who is also supporting me just to ensure this call is smoothly in the background. So the other one, of course, is then conserving nature. Sorry, I was on prosperity. On prosperity, the issues that were brought biggest was the issue of farmers' increase in profit. Then there was the issue of productivity improvement to an optimal target. And you remember in the discussions we had, the reason we're saying optimal is because you have both extremes. You have cases where farmers are producing way above what they could sustainably hold. And you also have on the other end of the extreme where farmers are not producing anything that can keep them or give them a living. So then that comes a close second. Then, of course, the share, increased share of free on board price to the farmer. This is in relation, of course, to what percentage of the value chain the farmer is achieving, or efficiency in the value chain, such that then the farmer receives a bigger share of the FOB price. And then issues to do with a bit of resilience, like increased diversification, becomes a close fourth. But that's how it looks. But I also want those of you in this meeting to look at it and also ask yourself, if you have not put your voice in this, where would it be? Would you agree with the direction it's moving to, or would you want to change it or tip it to a different direction? You have the chance. Because at the end of the day, what we want is, when we say, let's, for instance, on prosperity, let's work on these 4 things and report on, then when we pick profit, when we pick productivity improvement, when we pick efficiency of the chain through what percentage of the FOB price the farmer is getting, and a bit of the resilience through diversification, then we can give that as a picture and then say, this is what the coffee industry is contributing to in terms of success or improvement of the economic viability of the farmer through these concrete measures. I don't know whether anyone wants to ask any question when we're on prosperity before we go to conserving nature. And like I said, I can see Juan Yao Morales has raised. Let me unmute you. So that you get a chance to ask your questions. Unfortunately, the webinar mode, I have to promote you to a panelist first and then unmute you. There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much, George, for the opportunity. I think one thing that I miss here when I see the prosperity is something that was also discussed in the forum in Colombia in July, is how can we extend more education to the farmers, allowing them to access more hedging tools to their prices, to their costs of production, in order to couple this to this increased profit, let's say to arbor this increased profit through the productivity as well, but helping them to guarantee a great security of the future prices in their activity, remembering that we are talking about a perennial crop. So I think this is my comment.
Thank you very much, Morales, and on that. And what is talked about is guaranteeing the security by, of course, helping them to hedge against that price. So on this one, maybe what I would ask is really, we think about what kind of an indicator we would have, and then maybe also propose it and put it in there, and then get into the details of even looking at, how would we measure that and all that. But I like the part that you're saying that it's improving their capacity, to be able to do that. And how then do we measure whether that is leading, of course, to more resilience, but also, them getting a better price and so on. But I agree on you on that. And the other issue you realize, especially with such indicators that have to do with strategies that we need to put in place to either improve our farmers or improve their well-being and so on, is realizing that we at times, maybe for this small number, we are looking at the end, at the end product. We're not maybe looking at the progress within the strategies they put in place. We are looking at the end product, which is when they hedge and they get better prices, then of course their profit improves and their resilience improves. So maybe that's one part. But if we get a very good indicator for that gives us a very good way to show, then we should be able to throw it into the list and also then get to rally people to understand it. So maybe what I would ask for you, especially since this is a contributory activity, if you have a way of putting it like Catherine has put it on the chat, maybe type it, and then we will take that into consideration. And then I have a question from one of the participants who wants to know, I know the new webinar thing we are using makes you feel like you're the only one in the call, but we look for ways of seeing whether this technology helps us see each other better. But you want to know how many people we have. We had about 32 registered and 18 are on the call right now. So for those of you that want to know how big a crowd you are in, we are 18 on the call. We had 32 registrations. And so also the fact that all that registered will get a copy of these once this is uploaded into the system. And so if I may ask Morales that please just type in the suggestion on the chat and we will carry that up. So any other person, I can see a hand raised. Any other person with a comment, you can raise your hand. Let me give Pedro a chance to ask his question. So Pedro, you can talk.
Can you hear me, George?
Yes. Yes.
Well, hello everyone. My comment is on the issue of quality that I was kind of glad to see that this was one of the lowest rated by all, because we had good discussions here in our working group that some people wanted to include an indicator on quality. And the discussion here is like, we may have growers, even small ones, that do not feel or do not like to produce high quality coffee, but they have high productivity, they have high income, they respect the environment, they respect the social area, and they produce low quality, and they have a good living conditions, and they have market, they have people that buy their coffee, they have consumers. So isn't it sustainable? We have several regions of Brazil, and even we export a low quality coffee for some countries like Turkey, that they like it, and that's the way they like it, the consumers. So I think it's very complicated to say that quality, to relate quality to sustainability in a mandatory way, or in a way that it states that it's sustainable. Because if we have consumers buying that product, that's no problem in our view here. But that's a big discussion. Just a comment on that.
Thank you very much. And I think a couple of people agree with you. And I'm sure maybe they're the ones that put their votes right here. And for those of you that don't know, Pedro is part of the Brazilian working group that was among the first back in February to come up with indicators that have been customized for Brazil. And many of the things like he's mentioning that they have on their list of 34 indicators are also included here. And like he said, you know, the quality one did not receive as much support. And here also it does not receive as much support. But I hope there is no one from Turkey in the call where we say you do not want high quality coffee, but with you on that. Anyone else who wants to mention something before we go to the next part? Please feel free to raise up your hand, and if you have any questions also, please type them in, and we will move it on. So I can see one. I will promote you. Sorry, everyone, about the process it takes to get someone to talk, but we are also learning the technology and hope soon it will be a bit better in allowing us to do that. Mary, you wanted to say something. You're welcome to.
Thank you, George. Hello, everyone. This is Mary Pettit speaking from New York. And I think that Pedro's comment is very interesting. And when it comes to the quality of the coffees that everyone wants to see healthfully diversified, that's a real industry concern. We want different qualities from all producing countries to thrive. So perhaps it could help us in terms of identifying specific indicators to consider further integrating the GCP baseline code into this work, because that can be applied to coffees of all qualities, and we hope would help increase the prosperity of farms in every country as a starting point. That's my remark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. And let me move on to the next and almost final part, which was conserving nature. So on conserving nature, the one that received the most is, of course, percentage of area deforested, and this has to do with the deforestation. And what we noted here is the fact that if we had the GPS of where all our farmers are, we could work with entities like the Global Forest Watch and monitor these remotely, such that then we are not asking the farmers questions, but we can see, through satellite maps of our time, what that change has been. And I think the second closely one was water use reduction. Then the third one was in relation to optimized application of fertilizer based on soil analysis. And this has, a two-edge in terms of it also works on ensuring the quality of the water. So it avoids waste and, of course, contributes to water quality. The other one that was also not very far from it is the issue of pesticides and agrochemical usage, so reduction of that. And then there was a controversial one we had discussed last time, which is the product environmental footprint. And one of the comments was actually that if you had the product environmental footprint reduced, then it would take into consideration all these other issues that we've listed. So you have like one magic number that would take care of everything. But I think the challenge right now is the fact that the process for developing the category rules for coffee have sort of like stalled the last time we checked on the discussion that was happening in the EU. So we might have a good indicator, but then lack the methodology and the tools then to deliver it. But we are hoping in future, then we are able to get there. But before we get there, then I think we'd have to stick with the lower ones. Then, of course, close fifth was organic matter in the soil. Then issues to do with biodiversity, like areas set aside for conversion, actually supposed to be conservation, not conversion. It's conservation. And then last but not least, of course, is reduction in greenhouse gases. And you've seen them, and energy use. So for those in the call, I don't know whether you have any additional comments. We'll share all the other comments that came up during the discussions with you, so that then you also know what led people to, choosing one or another. But I don't know whether this team, because I am very sure all of you have not participated in it, because the number I have that registered for the call is a bit larger than the number that have done the poll, the survey. So if there is anyone in the meeting right now who has a comment of this, I think I will open up the floor again for comments on conservation of nature. And I can see there is a quick one. So I promote you to a panelist, and then I unmute you. Amy, the floor is yours. Oh, sorry, I hadn't unmuted. Yes,
Hello?
Amy?
Yeah, I actually had a bit more general, but this reminded me of it. So maybe let others talk about the conserved nature one specifically, but we could get back to it. Two things. One was that, as you said, it's a low sample or a low, number of people that responded to the survey. So obviously it would be much better to get more people providing input. But the point I wanted to have us discuss is a little bit is these related to the SDG with some of their indicators, because there are some clear overlaps. And I think that is a real important point of what is being proposed for sustainable agriculture in the SDGs, and might become things that governments and companies have to report on. And I think alignment with that, or at least identifying which of those indicators are aligned with that, I think would be helpful. So it's a more general comment.
Thank you very much, Amy. And for those of you that might want to know what Amy is talking about, I'll take you quickly to some of those indicators. And you can see here, especially on the environment, this is what is being proposed for SDG indicator 2.4.1, which talks about sustainable food production and sustainable an increase of area under sustainable agriculture, productive use and productive and agriculture and sustainable agriculture. And you can see for economic, we've highlighted the ones in green. Those ones are already part of the discussion that we just had earlier. And for environment, you have soil, water, water quality, energy use, and greenhouse gas, and a bit of biodiversity, where we were talking about conservation area and the same. So that's the overlap that Amy is talking about. But this is also open to you because these slides, you have an earlier version because I want this particular one has the latest version of the poll. And like Amy mentioned, the sample size that we have for these comments is still very low. But we want to encourage. But we also believe the people that went ahead and put in their comments were also the ones who really had that at heart. So we are also getting it from the ones that we believe wanted. I want to open up, and thank you very much, Amy, for that comment. I want to open up to Joost just to make a comment because you're talking about the landscape approach. So Joost, I've unmuted you. You can say something. And then after that, Moraes will have a small talk.
Yes, thank you. My name is Joost Pierrot from the Netherlands. I would like to advocate the more broader approach of the landscape or the whole community around the farm. If you focus only on the farm, then the impact and the outcomes could be very good, but the outcomes or impact on the community or the landscape or etc. around surrounding the farm, could be much worse. So that is my comment.
Thank you very much, Joost, for bringing that up. And we have put that to a note. And also thank you for the fact that you also put it on the chat. I want to unmute Moraes. You're unmuted now. You can.
Thank you, George. Yeah. And sorry for asking to speak again.
No, it's okay.
What I see there and brings me some concern is about how the use of fertilizer and pesticides is put from the negative side. And that worries me because when we look for the overall use of fertilizers in coffee in the world, we see that the levels of use of fertilizers is pretty low. You may have markets with a use at a higher level, such as Vietnam, in some regions of Brazil maybe, but when we look to the overall coffee production in the world, the issue is not excess use of fertilizer, but the lack of use of fertilizer. That goes directly to that yield, productivity, increase of profit on the coffee farming. So I just would like to leave this remark that maybe to combine all this conserve nature and prosperity part into that, we should consider the nutrient use efficiency from the fertilizer perspective, and not the excess or lack, because with the nutrient use efficiency, we can combine what are the benefits we can bring by the fertilizer, the soil analysis, the content of organic matter, and all these combined together on that. And also that goes with the water use reduction that became in second here in the conserve nature. I think much more on the efficiency of the use of this water should be considered, especially in times that we have so many climate events impacting our yield and coffee results.
Thank you very much on that, and your suggestion on improving how it's put is actually taken, and thank you for that again. And so many people agree with you on the chat, especially fully agree. And also the fact that we also need to include the use of biofertilizer on the same. So fully taken. So I think what we've noted for that, and if you don't mind, please also put it on the chat, is we need to change, the way we are talking about it to in a more positive way, more about efficiency rather than, blanket reduction, because then, of course, like you're saying, there's the need, to keep a balance on the nutrients if at all we are going to produce and meet the economic viability of farming in any way. So thank you very much for that. Pedro, I'm unmuting you. And if anyone else wants to talk, we've managed our time well. I wanted to make this more a discussion because we are talking about results and would want to see where you would have put your wager on this. But if you don't mind, I've seen a question. The poll is still open. I can put a link in the chat. And for those of you that haven't, please take some time and do it. And also from the email you received, I think it was yesterday, for those of you that had registered before, the poll link is there. So Pedro.
Okay, thanks, George. A comment on the last, the item area set aside for conservation that was not highly graded by the poll. And it's interesting for us here in Brazil because we have a very severe legislation that makes growers to leave area aside for conservation, and this has a great impact on sustainability in our view here, because we have coffee production and conservation of natural vegetation in the same farms. For example, near the water springs, that is crucial also to conservation of the water. And this worries me a little bit to have this item so low graded here on this poll, because I think it's fundamental, and we see in many countries that the full farm is dedicated to production. And then we can link this also to the comment of Joost, where we have the landscape approach, and if we have areas for conservation in the farms, we can link them and make like corridors of vegetation inside the farms that are a very good service for nature conservation in the future.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And again, like I'm saying, you see the activity of trying to prioritize and give more weight to some of them is ending up kicking some important ones, like Pedro has just mentioned. But as we continue, let's also know, depending on how the people reporting will feel, there will even be the chance to report on more. The reason for starting with less is just to kick us up. But I'm sure by 2020, we should have improved our systems and gotten enough value from it to be able to know that we can really give information on all these indicators, because we believe they're going to help us. And also thanks for all the comments on the chat, especially in relation to conservation area, and also thank you to COSA for part of the improvement of some of these indicators and suggestion on that. I don't know whether anyone else wants to say something before I sort of like open it up to a higher discussion for the next 20 minutes, where people are able to say more, and I sort of like finalized by some of the comments that we had on the system. So I think as you think about your questions, I will just move on and show you some of the comments that some of the people that put in said. If this is your comment, then well and good, but if it's not yours, then these are some of the things that people said. So one of the things that was said is that compensating producers and calculating price based on local cost of production is most meaningful indicator of our prosperity and improved livelihoods. Reversing deforestation and reduction of agrochemical use per hectare are also crucial sustainability indicators. Then the other one, someone said, I hope we as a coffee sector can move and make progress. The list of indicators is looking very promising if companies will really report on this. I am waiting for progress from the sector this since the Hamburg meeting back in 2013 on Vision 2020. Happy to support where appreciated. Then there was one on the improved livelihood indicators seems somewhat weak compared with other areas. We almost all indicators presented in this menu are appropriate and relevant. Then the last one, of course, was we all need to find a way to evaluate the adoption of best practices in a cost-effective way and establish the return on investment of the sustainability interventions. The survey is a great start. So those are some of the comments, that the people that took the survey, the ones that agreed to put a bit more comments than said. Going back to the charts, I know some of the charts are only doing it to the presenters, so some of you are not able to see, apart from the ones that are to all attendees. So one of the parts I want to pick here is, of course, there was the landscape approach, but Joost explained it a bit further. There was the part about and this one I will give Niels a chance to mention, because part of this work, especially the working group that came up with what was the important outcomes and impacts that we hope to achieve, was co-led with the Sustainable Coffee Challenge. And so Niels was finding out something about the way we are naming prosperity, because in the framework we had called it sustained supply. But I think let me give Niels a chance just to say hi, because this work we've done together, and also just say something little about the process that we had. And the other person I'll also give a chance to say something is in the comments, there's the mentioning of talking about pesticides and agrochemicals. I think we've interused that in the indicators both ways, but there's a mention of, if we are talking about challenges to do with pollution, then let's just talk about the pesticides and their use, rather than mixing that with agrochemicals. And then the other question, of course, was the indicator, like Moraes has just mentioned. The indicator should be on efficiency or optimized fertilizer application. So it's not on reduction. It's again like you're talking about the efficiency. And then there is also another one in terms of CCC, in collaboration with Conservation International and COSA, are developing landscape indicators for household and community areas in coffee. So that's also another part. So Niels, if you don't mind, you can say, sorry for putting you on the spot, but at least say hi, because part of this work was done together with the Sustainable Coffee Challenge, and like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, where we talked about the sustainability framework. So Niels, you're unmuted.
Thanks a lot, George. And apologies for the background here. I hope you can all hear me. Yeah, my question was around, so we've been going through the process of developing the broader sustainability progress framework, of which the quest towards the common indicators is a key component. And an element of the progress framework was this compass for the sector, and as in, like, what are the key areas where we should put our focus on and steer the sector towards. So yeah, my question was around, how do we work towards that common language and keep using that common language in terms of sustained supply, improve livelihood, conserve nature, and strengthen demand. So that was a question on my behalf, and then I was just typing another question, which was more perhaps guiding us a little bit in understanding the outcomes of the poll, as in, like, are we trying to prioritize what are the biggest issues for the coffee sector, and trying to get that out of the survey, or are we trying to get an understanding on where can we actually start measuring, which might not be the biggest issues or the most complex issues, because those are extremely difficult to capture, but it might be areas of focus where we can actually start measuring on a sector-wide level, which would already be extremely innovative. And I think that those are two different approaches to the same survey in this sense. So curious about your thoughts on that, George.
Thank you very much, Niels, especially on that one, because there's also another question on the chat. So ideally, the list that we have summarized, which has about almost, I think, more than 21, what we are trying to do is really see what areas can we start immediately reporting on, and especially also for GCP members who have committed to at least reporting on once those indicators are out there and the framework, concrete. So that's one. And then the objective of this particular webinar was really for us to show you, for those that took part in the survey, those are some of the things that they were prioritizing and saying, like now, for instance, on economic viability of farming, or in issues to do with the economic part, then they would want to ensure they're able to say something on either the profit, the productivity, and so on. So that is what we were trying to achieve. And Amy also mentioned how that compares with what the bigger discussion on sustainable agriculture under the SDGs is going on, and whether we are close to those two particular parts. So ideally, that's what we were hoping to achieve with this. And in which case, and I know in the survey on the introduction, it was really, if we were to start reporting, which ones would you give quick priority to, and they were numbered. So you have number 1 to 8, and just give number 1 as the one that you think we should be putting our hands on immediately, and then reporting on that and giving information on that particular one. So I don't know, Niels, whether that answers your question. As I look at the next question, I've unmuted you as I talk about the next question. I don't know whether that answers. I hope that gets closer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that absolutely helps. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Then the other one, I think, is from Fabian, who is asking, and he was wondering if there is a formulated theory of change describing the long-term impact we'd like to have as a sector-wide initiative, and spelling out some outcomes and objectives that we believe should help in achieving this impact over time. And thank you in advance. And yes, Fabian, to answer these, part of this has been put under the discussion that we've been having in the whole, and what Niels just talked about, whereby we came up with sustainability framework that then has, the different impacts and outcomes that we hope to achieve, and also, in the long term. And ideally also thinking about, what are the different pathways that get us there. I think there are about 15 different pathways of things that people do to get us there. So that is there. And I can give you a link, and all those in this group a link, so that you have a look at the document and also comment on this. So we started from that direction and then picked, and then from each of those areas, we have then these key indicators, and then asking ourselves which ones can we then start saying something concrete about, and then build on with time. But in terms of the long-term impacts and outcomes, yes, and even for some of those indicators that we've listed, they are in relation to either an outcome that we hope to achieve or an impact that we hope to achieve on the same. I don't know whether you'd want to say something. I think I should also, I think I should give people who are outrightly able to comment a chance also, so that the rest of us, the rest of the people, hear your voice and thank you for the contribution. So Fabienne, let me unmute you. Oh, sorry. Fabienne, you're unmuted. You can.
Hi, George. Yeah, thanks. Your answer was clear. Thank you for answering it. So yeah, I look forward to receiving the links from you, so I can take a closer look and see, retrace the journey you've obviously been in as a group, and try and rejoin you then from the point you are now, starting with impact and outcome objectives. That'll be very useful for me to understand. So yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabian, for that. And then, since our time is getting less and less, if any one of you has a question, again, like I've said, by the end of the day after tomorrow, you should have this presentation plus the recording on your email addresses. That's the way we've automated it. We've given ourselves at least a day so that if there's any downloading and if there's any answering or summarizing, then you have that. In relation to next steps, the survey is there, so for those of you that haven't, you can still use this link and put. And we want to encourage as many to put in the information. So then, like Amy was mentioning, we are not working on a very small sample to make such sweeping statements, whereas then it doesn't represent the view of the majority. Next steps, again, we are in October, so on the other part is the fact that to ensure that members are able to report, there is a parallel process that is developing, or not developing because we have these systems in place, but ensuring that we can provide a tool for those that do not have tools to then be able to use on the field to gather the information they need to report. And this is being done two ways. On one hand, we are working, at a landscape level. Like now, for instance, what Vietnam is developing, we want to work at a landscape level whereby they do sweeping areas like a whole village or a whole district and gather that information on. But we also want to encourage the different members, those that don't have tools in place, to utilize these and gather this information, so that then we are able to say as a whole sector, this is where we are on a particular issue. But if you have any comments also from this meeting, I really ask that you send them, so that then, because we are moving fast and we do not want to leave anyone behind. So we utilize these chances that we have to talk with you, to try and get your information, but also to give you a chance to say something about it. Then in October, during the member assembly, there will be a quick update on how far we've come, but also asking ourselves as members, is there an indicator or a set of indicators that we already have information on that we can say something as a start in a first report by the end of this year? So those are part of the things. And it's not talking about the whole 12 or 20. It could be 2 or 3, but encouraging people and showing people, if we came together and said something concrete about something, then what kind of impact that would be. And also how that would support for us to really support why we are using about 2% of the value on sustainability practices. So we have 4 minutes left. I don't know whether anyone has a burning question or a burning comment, but in the absence of that, I would be willing to give you time to get back to your busy schedules, and thanking you for taking this time, just to go through what people have been putting together, but also asking you, if you haven't, the link, you have this slide previously, so please go to that link and please put in your information, and encourage those that that are experts around you to also give us their view, so that then when we are coming with concrete decisions at the member assembly, then your part has been included. Any question, any hand raised, or do we just put a bye-bye and thank you for the attendance? I think without further ado, have yourselves a wonderful afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you may be, and look forward to further discussions with you online or offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
Thanks.